Welcome to our October 15th Outreach and Network Guild meeting. To start, as always, I will lead us in a bit of grounding. So we start by centering the land because land was here long before we existed, and the land will be here, thank goodness, long after we are gone. Everything that we are and experience in this life is because of the land and will return to the land. And so, with that in mind, I invite you to close your eyes and find a soft gaze and just start to notice your breath moving in and out of your body. Notice the weight of your body on the seat beneath you. And I'm going to try an oldie and a goodie today. I invite you to imagine your brain draining down into your trunk and just allow that drain to continue down your body, out through your feet, onto the land. And just notice how that stream flows out onto the land where you are. See if you can follow it. Be curious about where it wants to go. Just allowing that which no longer serves you to pour out and return to the land. Noticing our connection to the land that is always there. And now we can maybe invite some white light, some fresh energy to pour into our heads, into our brains, down through our body, filling up any gaps, any empty space with white light. And this is just one example of how energy might cycle through our bodies with intention, inviting in that newness and that fresh energy whenever we need it. And when you feel ready, you can start to wiggle your fingers and toes and open your eyes to come back to this space. Alrighty, and a check-in question. Do you have a check-in question?
Mm, Not especially. I was
I
thinking
do.
maybe, okay, cool.
What is one thing you're looking forward to?
Hmm, a nap.
You go first.
I
A nap.
am very much looking forward to a nap.
Nice.
Yes. Over to you.
Well, right now it is about 96 degrees Fahrenheit, and tomorrow the high is 76, which is a big deal. And
Wow.
I'm taking credit for it because I unpacked all my winter clothes yesterday. So
So obviously.
this was all of my doing. I'm
Yep.
very excited for tomorrow. I'm hoping to wear a sweater or something. Uh, but yeah, I'm hoping to just get to enjoy that when it happens.
I do think
All
it
righty.
funny that 76, which is above room temperature, is sweater weather for you.
Yes. Yep. Maybe just a morning sweater when it's like
Right,
in the
yeah.
50s and then
Yeah.
yeah. But pants for sure. Okay, I will share my screen. I have our meeting agenda up already. Can you see it?
I was bringing it up on mine, but yes, I could see yours.
Okay. So, let me just what is that? 'Cause it's long. Oh, it doesn't say which one.
If you hold it over, it will pop up. If you hold your cursor over the to just a little to the left,
Oh,
there.
thank you. Perfect. Um, so these are our medium item action items from our previous meeting. Um, Actually, that's not true. These are 2 meetings old. The
Mhm.
other action, we didn't have a lot of action items from our last meeting.
No, no.
It was basically keep on keeping on with the research project, maybe reconnect with some folks, different networks that we've been involved with in the past, but there was nothing concrete.
Mhm.
Um, did you sent out the review board invitation with the guild meeting, the guild
Yes.
update, right?
Yes.
Okay, I have not checked responses to the
I
Google
have
form.
either, but here, let
So
me.
I'm curious. Um,
Nope, no new responses.
okay, that might be worth another
Yeah,
reminder.
yeah. Well, and I was actually thinking that because we have the form now, it's a really easy thing to point people to. So I
Hmm.
think we can actually, I was even thinking about it as part of our signature line for the friend's email.
Oh, okay.
It can be something that we kind of point people to more regularly and individually as well. Like Ruth filled it out,
Yeah,
but like we ask Austin to fill it out,
yeah.
etc.
Okay. So for today, we really just had 2 ideas come up for the agenda. One of them is thinking about how we apply our resource criteria to social media posts. And for that
Hmm.
matter, there might be other things too that we want
Hmm.
to apply them to,
Hmm.
as well as talking through the 2025 cohort. And I haven't looked at what you compiled yet, but I did link it there.
Cool. Awesome.
Um, so I feel up for starting with either one. What do you feel drawn to?
Um, I think let's start with the criteria because I think it's probably a good way of actually, you know what, the criteria and were you party to the how do we assess partnerships? I think that was in Heartwork. Um,
Okay.
and they're both relevant for the cohort. So yeah, talk through potential partner process. So actually,
Okay.
yeah, I think if we review both of those
Okay.
as a
Cool.
kind of starting place and um, I think I've got a splinter or something. You may be in the 90s, but we are in wood fire season. And
Wow.
so I
Well,
keep getting little splinters when I put wood in the stove.
oh yeah,
So anyhow, my life is
that's
hard.
very both and.
Yeah, yeah,
My life
yeah,
is hard.
yeah.
Oh, geez.
Alrighty.
Um, every time I read through this list, I feel so good. I'm like, this is such a good list. Um, anyway, but yeah, we can do considerations. So we're thinking about um, applying criteria to social media posts and partnerships, or how do you want to?
No, let's just leave this to the posts and
Okay.
see. Well, not to actually to well, actually to the syllabus or uh because it kind of ties in with redoing the connect the dots
Hmm.
mapping exercise kind of thing.
Okay. Cool. You want to start us off?
I'm just looking through it right now. So Oh, and we added one. I went over this in one of the meetings, and we added uh sort of evidence-based,
Mm,
experiential evidence-based. I don't mean it evidence-based as in um, there has to be some sort of academic
mm,
uh thing, but that it's not just thoughts. It's not just hopes and prayers. It's tested in experience.
cool.
Um, so I guess that's kind of my first consideration. Over to you.
I like that. And I just coined the term experience based, um,
I like that.
which feels, because yeah, when I hear evidence based, my mind goes to there has to be an academic study. It's like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah.
Um, this is making me think about, in terms of social media posts, things that we've already talked about, like posing questions to get people to think about things,
Mhm,
um, rather than statements of truth or fact. Um, so that's being invitational, asking questions,
mhm,
and posing questions in a way that isn't like a leading question, but like, if we really think critically about this, what comes up?
mhm,
So, like that seems tied to like considering how do we build culture? How do we build the culture we want to be creating? Well, we need to be thinking critically about things.
mhm.
Um, yeah, that's mine. Over to you.
Cool. Well, and it makes me think the considering I think most of my considerations are really just the nest points around how to interpret the criteria, or because I'm thinking about the considering different perspectives in that same spirit. It's things that are both and, where it's not about saying one thing is right, one thing is wrong, or you're not arguing for a perspective. You're basically saying it's like everything has pros and cons. And looking from perspective A, we see these pros and these cons, and from perspective B, we see these different cons and pros, um, but it's sort of it just makes me think both and. So I think part of the considering different perspectives is a both and, uh, a spirit of both and. Back to you.
I'm also thinking about even kind of taking a broader view than the criteria. What is the purpose of a post?
Mm,
Um, because especially with like things like current events, there's tons of posts out there that are already saying A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
mhm,
And so what do we want um, to communicate or propose or consider for the post? Over to you.
well, a thought that just came to me is it's a meta thought, which is also how do the criteria themselves evolve? Um, it's actually sort of what we're doing here. When we have the review board set up, I think it would be really interesting to invite the review board periodically to say, how are the criteria working? Are they helpful? Are any of them unclear or unhelpful? Is there anything missing? So basically, um, building into the criteria that's an AMAC reflect on the criteria themselves, letting them be alive.
Yeah, I like that. Um, I'm thinking about the relationality piece and sort of what is the relationship between things. So like if we take a current event or if anything, if we're talking about, new research on the climate crisis, which I read some today that is very alarming. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, um what does that have to do with lifeboat building? Like
Mhm.
does that impact how we're already working? I think that's a good question to ask.
Yep.
How does
Yeah.
it impact what we're doing? If it doesn't, if it does or doesn't, what do we do with that information? Over to you.
Well, and that I feel like again, to me that feels like elaborating what do we mean by consider how humans build culture.
Mm,
And also answers that question around uh what's the purpose of a post? Because I think there's an implication here. The purpose is we've already got um kind of prompting important conversations that aren't happening and refining our practice and making connections. So yeah, because which again, I feel like this is already in a way, I feel like we're not really adding to the criteria. We're just kind of unpacking each of them a little bit. Because I think that considering different perspectives and relationality is connecting the dots. What's the relationship between this perspective, this problem, and this idea, whatever. Um, the considering how we build culture is that it has to be, it's not just, I think that's AMAC reflect because it's not enough to have an idea. The idea has to be put into practice, right? And um, yeah. But anyhow, I feel like I come back to, yeah, I really like the criteria and um, yeah, and again, I feel like the fact that our considerations are mostly just kind of fleshing out what we mean by this, and this kind of makes me feel like we're right where we need to be. Back to you.
I think so too. And I think like the memes that Roland posts are very much in alignment with all of this. It's taking these quotes from different people who are thinking critically, asking questions, shining light on things, um, considering different perspectives. This is all things that we already do.
Hmm.
And I noticed that he posted the quote from you about privilege.
Hmm.
Um, like, what privilege do you want to cash in to make the world a better place or something?
Hmm.
And we actually got a comment on that saying, I love this or something like that. Like, this is really, I don't remember what the comment was, but it was very positive. And so I am curious about, and that was a quote from you. Like, that
Hmm.
came out of conversation, directly from conversations that we have had. And so I am curious about bringing more of us into the social media posts,
Yeah.
um, to prove to have those discussions, and even, and I'm not sure yet necessarily what that looks like, but just noting that,
Hmm.
I thought that was interesting today. Over to you.
Yeah, that's very cool. And Roland checked out Austin's TikTok and was kind of inspired by it um, in the same sort of recognizing that we can do that with kind of low effort. This doesn't have to be slick. It doesn't have to be, edited video. It could actually be, and I think that what you're saying, partly what you're talking about is this is how we have conversations around here. And so these aren't applying new criteria. They're just pulling out what it is that feels most valuable about how we already have conversations. So it's an encouragement. Oh, and that actually reminds me of another thing Roland was saying, um, which is it's okay to be provocative. It's okay to risk some people being offended. We're not looking to to comfort everybody, we're not looking to validate your preconceived ideas. And so, putting it out there, it's okay for it to be controversial. And I think there's a difference between provoking people and, being rude and offensive. It's there's one thing to be disrespectful, and there's something else about, calling something out. Um, Anyhow, so yeah, I think that's good for me. Over to you.
I totally agree with that. And I see it as it's really being, it's really like being offensive to the dominant culture more than it is being offensive to people. And I think if people are offended, like that's an opportunity to them for them to examine what is it in me that is triggered by that statement. And more
Mhm.
often than not, like it's going to be something that they've accepted as truth that needs to be challenged. So I think
Yeah, yeah,
actually, I know I'm not saying I want to get into Facebook wars, but I
right.
am saying it's I do want to offend some people. Um because it's kind of like what y'all were saying about the lifeboat word. It's good to get people talking and discussing and having feelings and asking questions.
Hmm.
And we don't even necessarily have to engage when it happens.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's what I have. Over to you.
Cool. I think I'm ready to move on because I think we're going to continue with other things. I feel like this will, carry through the next items on the agenda. And it is causing me to remember. And one of the things I have found it for myself, and I've found it for other people as well, nothing shuts me down more than thinking I'm not allowed to say things. And so there's, by being able to bring something up where somebody might get triggered, might get provoked, might get offended, whatever, and really to demonstrate, all right, let's talk about that. Like I'm not afraid of that, and you don't have to be ashamed of it, and I don't feel guilty for having said something.
Hmm.
And we can talk about, I also don't want to cause you harm. Like I don't want to cause you pain, but I also get to say what I get to say, you know. And I have choice, and choices have consequences, right? So whatever I say, I need to be take responsibility for any consequences that causes, and I get to say it. It's that sort of, it's the both and. Um, Anyhow, I feel like this is probably going to go right into the talking about the partnerships, but so I'm good to move on whenever you are, and over to you.
Yep. So I went over into the partner process um, page. And what are the steps when we stumble on a potential ally or connection? Who reviews or discusses that? What guilds are responsible? Um, this is a really good question. I'm just reading through the notes.
Yeah, me too.
Um, Need a process that should include Venn diagrams of where the projects overlap, criteria for strengths and weaknesses, consider relationality and capacity, coordination circle. Okay. Do you want to start us off to sort of Do you have
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
context or? Okay.
Yeah. I can give the context. Um, it started in one place and it applies to two other places automatically, instantly. Um, it started because just in my normal course of the day, I don't think a day goes by when I don't get some, oh, have you heard about so and so? Or you should talk to so and so. And um, and frequently it's, multiple recommendations a day, like more than I have. There are already people on the list that I think are have a lot of potential, and I would like to spend some time exploring that relationship. And I can't even get the time to do the top of the list because there's so many other ones kind of coming in. One in particular that, well, Diana Leaf Christensen, um, Austin has a connection through her, Becca has a connection with her. Um, and I have tremendous admiration for her stuff. It's relevant to what we're doing. It's aligned with what we're. I would say she is further advanced, so our stuff is aligned with what she is putting out there. Um, and so there's and that's a one kind of relationship where there's somebody who's kind of a leader in some of the stuff that we're offering. How do we approach that? There is another group called Micro Solidarity, which is, I'm trying to remember, Richard Bartlett, who is one of the co-founders of Lumio. And he started this thing, I think in 2019. It's relatively recent. And it's basically Lifeboat. It's uh actually, let me say, by micro solidarity, he is putting the emphasis on learning how to work well relationally in small groups is absolutely essential to building anything like a social movement. We need to learn like real life relationality. And so micro solidarity is encouraging people to develop, like other people are developing things similar to the Lifeboat Academy. And micro solidarity is encouraging everyone to do that and to stay connected on, how our efforts are overlapping. So just tremendous alignment there in terms of what we're trying to do, and probably some resources that might be useful. How do we pursue that? How does that fit into the other things that are already going on? So that's where it came from. And then the other two places where I think this is directly relevant, one is with the research project. How do we prioritize, who to contact, um, to, start to ask for recommendations for people we should interview or research partners? And how do we process that? How do we assess then the conversations that we're having? And then sort of the next step on from that is thinking about our cohort of lifeboat builders. What are our criteria for um, inviting, encouraging a lifeboat to participate? And, how do we assess whether, and in some ways, I think it's not really a new conversation. How do we assess people's readiness? This is something we've been talking about for quite a while. Anyhow, so that's the context. And with that, I will pass it back to you to see what your thoughts are and/or questions.
This is another one of those just perennial
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
That's really like in a way, like the most important question is or the core of it is like, how do we assess mutual benefit and what is the relationship?
Mhm.
Um, and something's kind of sticking in my mind, which is um, moving from the importance of moving from ideas into action. And it's like you're saying, we're all constantly being referred to these other projects where the ideas are the same or similar. And so my question is, what are they actually doing? Because if we can say,
Mhm.
here's what we're offering, we offer these groups, we offer mentoring, we offer these webinars. What are you offering? Because instead of let's join forces and muddle through, it can be okay, y'all are offering this webinar on this day that seems useful to us and we want to go. And kind of then the relationship is more emergent and based on that mutual need
Mhm.
instead of trying to figure out conceptually kind of what the relationship is, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
um so keeping it really grounded and practical, and then we'll know, okay, so we learn about a project or a resource, we can take note of the specific offerings, and then all the people in our network, somebody says, hey, I want to learn about this. Oh, Micro Solidarity is doing a talk on that next week. Here's where you can sign up. um so in a way, I'm wondering about how do we keep track of that for each of these groups and their what they're offering. How do we do that? Do we create a page on our help desk? um I don't know, but
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
what's coming to mind. Over to you.
Mhm. I want to jump over to the outline that I see for the 2025 cohort, because I think there may be some practical, I feel like we might want to go over and come back.
Okay.
Um, uh, and in part because in so what I did is I put together, based on my own, and it wasn't anything I did explicitly. I've just been bouncing from between a couple different things. So these ideas have kind of been sloshing back and forth. And there were a few things that came out of the connect the dots mapping the territory process that just kind of landed with a like, oh, well, that's it. Um, and so, but I think it's actually what we were talking about here is where like a process for how we assess the Venn diagram. That one of the things that was April's point of, seeing, and that's one of the things is we don't want to partner with somebody if they're doing what we're doing, then there's no reason for us to partner, right?
Mm,
Right? Like we're doing it, they're doing it, us doing it together, unless there's an economies of scale. You know what I mean? Like if there's pooling resources like that, there's no complementarity, right? There's no complement to what our strengths and weaknesses are going to be the same. So we
yeah.
want somebody who is where there is something different, like where the difference is actually a benefit, but we don't want it to be so different that there's no touch, that there's no overlap between what it's uh somebody that's using sociocracy, but using it only for high value tech startups, you know, and they're just promoting how this can be sold to entrepreneurs or something like that. Well,
Hmm.
even though there's a little bit of a connection there, there's nothing really where we could benefit from each other.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I'm making a straw dog here. But yeah, I think that what we're talking about is this sort of, how do we practically say what's your ask, what's your offer, what's your need, and what are you offering? And I think that there's also something about um, there's a time factor here. And I think this is the relationality that I guess it's overcoming this binary. Are we going to be partners or not? Yes or
Mm,
no. But sort of allowing this feels like it has potential, or this feels like it's fading, you know, because there may be, I can imagine lots of situations where somebody is right now, they don't really have much to offer because they're stuck in the water. Um, but how do you know when they get a wind behind them? And so how do you keep that relationship? I guess that's the thing, is part of the criteria here is over time, not just right now, but yeah, and then it's just making me think it's tricky. How do you do that practically? How do you keep that record, um, yeah, in a useful way? Over to you.
um, I had a thought, and then I got distracted. Um, I don't know, but do you want to go look over at the cohort page?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Committed core group. Oh, cool. Okay. Um,
Well, and let's look also at the draft 2025 academic year plan.
yeah, yeah. A rough draft of the project plan, a book report on 3 to 5 foundational resources. We help with the charrette, do populate the guilds. Winter term.
Oh, and I forgot, actually, this is, so just like we did in the last session where everyone gets a chance to say, this is why I like this is why I like that, and then we vote.
Oh, this is great. This makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. This makes total sense. And it's, I mean, we kind of already did this year.
I
This
think
is
what's,
just like an improved version.
yeah, I think what was missing, it's a little bit April's thing about the 2.201.
Hmm.
Like we covered the theory part, but we didn't actually have we and that I think that's part of the reality, is I think it's going to take a season for people to do the coursework,
Yeah.
to do the prep
Yeah.
work. And so it's just kind of setting people up to, that's the timeline. So we use the winter months to make a plan, which is actually how farms work anyhow, right? So it kind of is.
Hmm.
So, we take the winter to make a plan, and then the summer and fall are opportunities for people to test things out.
Hmm.
And And actually, I think in the documenting the 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 idea behind the switchboard in part was if everyone is monitoring, you're connected with Good Grief Network and a couple other networks. And I'm connected with, say, I end up spending more time with Micro Solidarity and the commitment pooling folks. So I'm spending my time there, you're spending your time there. I don't need to be monitoring Good Grief. You're going to let me know. You
Yeah.
know enough about what I'm doing that you can let me know if something comes up. And likewise, if you and I and everyone else comes together to problem solve things, then you could be the one who says, "Oh, well, Good Grief already has this thing that they do,
Hmm.
and they're starting another cohort next month. You should start." You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like that, it's basically rather than thinking about a website, it's the human library thing. How do we each take responsibility for, and I mean, and this doesn't have to be overly engineered. It's basically, I just know what networks you're paying attention to. You know what networks I'm paying attention to. Our specialty areas, the areas that we're particularly um, where we have something to offer, like,
Yeah.
where our skill set is. And then we just and then it's serendipity when it comes up.
Yeah,
Anyhow,
that
I
makes a
think
lot of sense.
I'm out of turn. Over to you.
I think this looks great, and I feel like I've lost the thread, but in the sense of this all makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
um I wish I could remember the thought I had when we went to break. um Let me go back. Yeah, so connecting the switchboard to the question, how do we assess mutual benefit? It's each of us are tapped into different networks and are staying connected through relationships, whatever that relationship is. It could be even just following them on social media, but staying connected and knowing what in particular those networks are offering. And then we can plug people in. Um, and that can happen through guilds and the coordination circle, I suppose, depending on the situation, like depending on what the topic is. Um, and so, as part of that, so the sort of the beginning of that process, going back to what do we do when we hear about somebody, is I think part of it is thinking about who's in our network. Does somebody already know about them? Is somebody already connected to them? Um, if not, who might be interested in who might be experienced in this area to assess, is this useful? Because if it's somebody who works on climate grief stuff, well, I'm already connected to Good Grief Network, so I could go to this person's website and see, are they doing something the same as Good Grief? Are they doing something else that's useful? And then I can say, hey, they're doing this thing that isn't there's something new that I haven't seen before. Let's check it out. So to me, that seems like leaning into the network, leaning into uh, people's fields that they sort of proclaim. These are my areas. Um, Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, and I think um, it strikes me that we can be kind of technology ambivalent. Um, like I could imagine this. Well, I'd always thought of there being a kind of an email side to it where, and the way that I thought about it before is so as a lifeboat builder, I am monitoring people in my community, whatever that means to me. And it's one of the things that I've said before that I feel like it's probably worth unpacking a little bit more. But I've there's in my mind there is a way of working within a lifeboat and then a way of working between the lifeboats, and those are different. Within a lifeboat, diversity becomes a real asset. You want really broad perspective, very different skill sets because you're tied to the land. So all of these different ways of thinking are tied to some very concrete, specific thing. And that specific thing holds it all together. But in between the lifeboats, it makes more sense for people to specialize, for within each lifeboat, the people that are dealing with eco grief talk to other people in other lifeboats about eco grief and not necessarily about raising pigs or not about micro solidarity or whatever. Um, so it strikes me that there's something about that kind of inside my network, I can just field any question. As a switchboard operator, it doesn't matter whether I know anything at all about it. I can field it, and then my external connections help me channel that in the right direction. Sort of, I think it's what you're describing, right? Has anyone else heard of this group? Which is part of relationality. Reputation is actually part of relationality, in my mind. And we've had firsthand experiences of people whose brochure looked really good, but then whenever you got inside, it was like, oh, that's not really what's happening here. Um, so sort of being able to give that hard feedback, like you're saying, is this is really new, or this is actually, good grief is doing this and better. So, you know, we can redirect those people to find good grief, or something like that. I'm rambling now
Yeah,
too. I think I might be losing the thread. So over to you.
this connects to something I've been thinking about. I actually had a conversation with a friend yesterday about how do we each sort of specialize in like what are our roles? What is
Okay.
our role or roles in building resilience? And I couldn't find the right language for it. Like at one point I said, it's about what is the unique thing that you offer? And it's not about you have to be unique, you have to be special, but it's like what is the mutual benefit between you and the community? Like what are you passionate about and good at that other people need? And this really feels like encouraging people to find that and focus on that because we do need a diversity of skill sets. And then once each of us knows kind of what our thing is, we connect to other people who are also focusing on that for support, mentorship, resource sharing, right? All of that kind of stuff. So I think that to bring it back to sort of our plan for next year, I think that's part of each lifeboat builder's um, work is what is your area of focus or maybe two areas where you are committing to uh, kind of in a way like staying sharp, like being aware of what's going on, being educated in that field, whatever that means for you, you know. Um,
Hmm.
because I do feel like that really does tie in with the project, because that's also going to inform what your experiments are. Because
Hmm.
I'm focusing on grief work. Um, I'm not gonna run an experiment on raising pigs. I've been running experiments on how do I get people to do grief work? Like
Hmm.
what resonates with people. So yeah, that all seems connected to me. Over to you.
Yeah, this sounds great. It reminds me of Ruth saying there's something about getting people to talk about their growth edges. Um, there's an enticement to, where are you curious? Where do you want to get better? And it makes me think of Ikigai. Um,
Yeah,
and that also, maybe that's something that we throw into the process where, well, actually, I think what you're talking about sounds like an Ikigai assessment, you know, um, where are you passionate, good at it, and there's a need for it. And the fourth one is people are able to pay for it. And and I think that there's still a question in here about resources and, are there resources available to make this sustainable? Um,
right.
which doesn't have to be, I think that part of this economic healing, I'm just I think a culture needs an economic system. The problem that we have is that ours is so fucked up that we've all been so brutalized by it. We all just want to run away from it entirely. A no money world, and you just do what you love, and everything works out. And and I think that reaction to the rejection of what we have right now is entirely warranted. And we do need something that kind of, not everyone can be a poet, or like not everyone can be a full-time poet. Everyone can be a poet. Everyone can be a musician, but that doesn't mean everyone's going to get paid to do it, to the exclusion of going out and planting a garden. Um, and I actually think I've cracked the seal on that. I put together a spreadsheet for how a commitment pool can work, with examples and everything. So something to add into the hopper, I think, is the commitment pool aspect of involvement with the Lifeboat Academy. So how are we tracking where people are making contributions and how they're getting compensated for the contributions that they're making? Um, but I feel like this feels just, yeah, let's just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to you.
Whenever I start to feel sort of at a loss for how do we have an economic system that works, this image comes to mind of like a literal little marketplace
Mhm,
where
mhm,
people have stalls and they have their specific thing that they're offering. And you can also go around to other people's, you can trade, you
mhm,
can spend coins. But it's like, just because you're selling eggplants doesn't mean you have to buy all your other food. It's like you might still have a garden at home and your
mhm.
neighbor also grows food, but you go to the market to get your cheese.
Yeah,
And it's like
yeah,
really like diversifying. It's diversifying and also focusing at the same time.
yeah.
But I think one reason that lifeboat building can seem so uh daunting is because and I know I've had this experience. It's like, oh, well, that means I'm going to have to learn how to do everything.
Mhm,
And actually, being a jack of all trades, it's a positive because that means I'm as resilient and secure as possible. But actually, if you're not focusing on certain skills that you're honing, you can only go so far in
mhm,
any of those areas versus picking one or two things that you're really good at and letting other people fill in the gaps and vice
mhm.
versa. And so, how do we it just feels really important to weave this into our lifeboat building.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't have space at my house to have a whole farm, but I can grow some stuff, and my neighbors grow stuff too. And so together we have, and I can get us all together to do a grief circle. And it's like, this is slowly but surely, like, if we all focus on our thing and stay in contact with each other, we grow our resilience.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know exactly how to package that and market that to people we're talking to and say, like, yes, you can do this. It doesn't have to be so overwhelming. Um, but I think the way that we're designing the semester or the year is that. Like,
Hmm.
we are literally going to walk you through how to focus on your thing, how to think about your relationships. We're going to offer
Hmm.
emotional support, practical support. It's all there in this package.
Hmm.
Anyway, I think that was my form of just kind of integrating what I'm hearing. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's both and because
yeah.
um because I think it is the difference between um all I do in my life is I am a neurosurgeon.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there are some professions where that's important.
Mm-hmm.
But for the majority of things, it's a difference. Uh, Ardell Broadbent?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she sent us a guy in BC who is making wooden yurts, and which actually look pretty interesting. And their pricing includes um, installation, and full installation if you help. And so, they have this package where if you're actually going to be there to help offload the truck and put things together and learn how they go together, you're paying for the expert's time, the guy who built it, who knows how everything works and isn't trying to read it off a diagram. And he doesn't have to do it all himself. And there's like a skill exchange in that, right? Where I may not know how to build one of the wooden yurts from scratch, but I'm
Mm,
probably going to figure some stuff out. But
mm-hmm.
by helping him put together the thing, it actually makes me a better customer of his stuff because now the second time I probably don't have to pay for installation.
Mm-hmm.
After doing it once, maybe I feel comfortable or not. And, but it's my choice. And I think that that's so and it's also a change is as good as a break. It's like, you know, if you are a field working farmer and that's all you do, and you're 60 hours a week during the entire growing season, you can only do it 10 years until your body craps out and you start to hate it, you know? And it's not the activity, it's the fact that that's the only thing that's your everything.
Yeah.
So I feel like, anyhow, I agree. I think I'm also just integrating. It's like this is a much healthier way of being together where there are going to be some tasks where everyone needs to show up and you're just a helper. You're not expected to be knowledgeable or, some basic level of knowledge and skill. Everyone can facilitate a relatively low stakes circle. You know, it's not that hard. And so you don't need a facilitator to come to every guild meeting. You can do
Mm-hmm.
your guild meetings, you can do your regular meetings. If something's hot, you might want to have help. A big problem, or, at the start of a project or close to a milestone or something like that. That there are times when it's not the binary. It's not like, oh, you always need somebody who has a degree in whatever to
Mm-hmm.
do the thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
and and recognize if you're a novice, you're a novice. If you're intermediate, you're intermediate. And if you're skilled, you're skilled. And it's like, and when do we use those skills? Anyhow, I think I'm just excited. I don't think I'm actually adding anything other than like, yeah, this is really cool. Let's do this. Um,
I agree.
cool. Let's do this.
That's also where I am. We talked about everything
Hmm.
that we wanted to talk about. Um, do you feel complete with this?
I am still a little worried for the prep work for the cohort. At the bottom, I have the timely next steps. And my main concern right now is I'm pretty much swamped.
Yeah,
And I feel like things have to happen not like today, but
yeah,
by next week.
yeah.
So I think mostly what I am looking for is I want to share having this on the radar. I think that's mostly, I don't think I need anyone saying, I will do this part, I will do this part, although that would be fine if it happens. But I feel at this point, I just want to make sure that I'm not the only one who is thinking about January. That's what I need.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think, yeah, this feels like it's landed a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I think I want to look at these next steps before our coordination circle. And I mean, it seems like our coordination circle is going to be this, like what needs to happen in the next couple weeks, who's going to do what. Um, I
But
mean, because
yeah,
that's just where we are. We did the connect the dots, we came up with the criteria. We've been doing aim act reflect, and now we're looking at next year. We have
yeah,
lifeboat builders involved.
yeah,
Um, I think we're primed and ready. So,
I agree.
um,
And I am within spitting distance of having the bylaws drafted, and I'm starting to get really excited about them, which is
awesome.
they've gone from really like very complicated and detailed, and now it's stripped back to, I think there are some deceptively simple mechanisms that are totally the bylaws will not look radically different from other bylaws, but they will be radically different because of a
Totally.
couple little things, I think.
Both
Anyhow,
and
both
I love
and
it.
yeah.
Yeah, this is all very exciting. It's so interesting, just like having been part of this long enough now where it's like, oh yeah, aim act reflect works. And
Hmm.
like the first year, like this year has looked a lot different from last year
Hmm.
with a lot of the same elements, and next year even more so. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, it's just really cool to be part of the development.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's it's I find it's in a healthy way, it's addictive, you
Yeah,
know? It's the flip side. I feel like I can relax into things more and more. It's, when things are coming up, it's like, well, we'll work it through. One step, next step, one step, next step.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Awesome.
All righty. Well, I will see you in a little bit.
Sounds good. See you then. Bye.
Bye bye.